Hello, precalculus students. This is Ms. Lobbs, and these are the solutions to the last three problems on your conic review sheet. They were the systems problems. Problem number 20 had the two conics here. We had a parabola and we had a hyperbola. You had to algebraically solve this system. First of all, we're going to call these equations 1 and equations 2 for a little bit easier dialogue. And the method we're going to use for this particular problem is substitution method. We're going to use one of these equations to solve for x squared and sub that into one of the other equation. So using equation 1, I'm going to multiply all the terms by 4 so that there's no fractions. And then I'm going to use that to solve for x squared, and I get that x squared equals 4y plus 4. I'm going to substitute that into equation 2. And we end up with this equation. We're going to solve the quadratic, which means to expand, collect, get it equal to 0, and factor, or do whatever we can. I've got y squared minus 4y equals 0, which we can see that the answer is y equals 0 or y equals 4. Just factor out the y and you can see that. So now I have to substitute that in. I have to plug in that y equals 0 into one of the equations and solve for x. So I plug that into equation number 1, where I had already solved for, you can see where I used it up here, this place. And so I substitute that in, and I get that x equals plus or minus 2. And so therefore, I've got solutions to the system. We have those first 2 points, that when x is positive 2, y is 0, and when x is negative 2, y is 0. Now we're going to do the same thing with the other solution for y. Plug in y equals 4. We get that x is going to equal positive or negative 2 root 5. So we have the other 2 points. And so those 4 points are the solution to this system where the parabola and the hyperbola intersect. The second system, I've got a ellipse and I have a hyperbola. And again, I'm calling equations 1 and equations 2. I'm going to use the elimination method this time. And I notice that if I multiply equation 2 times 2 and add that to equation 1, that my my y squareds, I will have a positive and a negative 2y squared. So this will cause an elimination when I add these two equations together. Get 7x squared equals 20. X squared equals 20 over 7. That means that the x is equal to both positive and negative 2 root 35 over 7. I'm going to substitute that in. So I substitute back into equation number 1. And remember that I'm going to be substituting in x squared, which is a lot easier. So I'm going to have the 20 over 7, because positive 2 root 35 over 7 is 20 over 7. And I solve for y, and I get that y is positive or negative 5 root 7 over 7. And I'm going to write the solutions down here. So that means right now I currently have 2 points. I have positive 2 root 35 over 7, comma 5 root 7 over 7, and positive 2 root 35 over 7, negative 5 root 7 over 7. And now I'm going to use the second solution, because remember this was x was positive and then negative, so I did the positive already. Now I'm going to do the negative. But when I substitute it in, I'm going to square that, and that's 20 over 7, which is exactly the same as what I did up above. So I'm going to get the same answers when I solve it. I'm going to get y equals positive and negative 5 root 7. So this gives me the next 2 answers, and this is where now I have negative 2 root 35 over 7, 5 root 7 over 7. So these are the 4 answers, and you need to write them out in this fashion. I don't like the use of the positive and negative in the points. I don't want you to write, I've got a positive here and a negative here. Don't write them together with the positive negative symbol. I want you to write them out as the 4 separate points that they are. And the third one is this conic section, 2 conic sections, excuse me. I've got an equation of a circle. That's equation number 1. And we've got an equation of a parabola. That is a downward parabola. And so the question is, well, what method do we use here? I don't see anything real clear at first. And then we notice, oh, wait a minute. I have a group x plus 2 quantity squared and x plus 2 quantity squared in both of those equations. So I'm going to use substitution method. I'm going to use equation 2 to solve for x plus 2 quantity squared. And by adding that to both sides and then subtracting the y, I get that x plus 2 quantity squared is equal to 3 minus y. I'm going to use that to substitute into equation 1. And you'll see what I've got there. I've got the quantity 3 minus y plus the quantity y plus 1 squared equals 10. So this is a polynomial equation. I'm going to expand and collect like terms and get it equal to 0. And when I do, I have the following. You can just pause this if you need to look at that more carefully. We end up with the answers of y equals negative 3 or y equals 2. So I have two cases. So case number 1, y equals negative 3. I'm plugging that into where I'd already started to solve right here. I'm going to use this, and I notice that I can solve for x by taking the square root of 3 minus y. I get positive and negative, square root of 3 minus y, and then I just subtract the 2. So now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be plugging that y in here, and I'll get my x. And I get that x is equal to square root of 6 minus 2. But I also have the negative, because I got a positive square root and I got a negative square root, so plugging that in, I get negative square root of 6 minus 2. And case number 2 is where y equals 2, plugging it back into that same equation we just were talking about, and I get x equals negative 1. And I plug it in again, and I get, because I've got remember the outside of that square root, I have the positive of this square root, and I also have the negative of this square root. So I get x equals negative 1, and I get x equals negative 3. I need to write my points now. I have this that y is negative 3 when I have this x, and y is negative 3 when I have this x. So I'm going to write down all my points. I've got my, I've written it backwards. Hold on just a moment. Okay, I've got it fixed now. So the first 2 points we've got is negative 2 plus the square root of 6, comma, negative 3, and negative 2 minus the square root of 6, comma, negative 3. And the other 2 points are negative 1, comma 2, and negative 3, comma 2. And so these are the solutions to the last 3 problems on your conic review sheet.